is that oftentimes people are able to use equipment and technology to compensate for that weakness. But many times I've had people tell me that they don't want to use a piece of equipment or a piece of technology because to them it symbolizes a loss, that their inability to do something. And really what we at the chapter try to do is try to get them to change their thinking. And instead of looking at that glass as being half full, look at it as, half empty, but look at it as being half full. That the technology and the equipment would maybe allow them to continue to participate in what they want to do, to stay engaged in life. Many years ago, our chapter began a durable medical equipment loan pool. And the reason it started was that Medicare determined that any piece of equipment in the bathroom was a luxury. And so Medicare would not pay for maybe a $150 tub transfer bench to help someone transfer in and out of the tub. But if the person fell and they broke their hip, then Medicare would pay for the hip replacement. So didn't really make a lot of sense. So the equipment loan pool began with bathroom equipment, and then since then has expanded into many different things. What we've found is that sometimes insurance, depending on what policy the person has, might not pay for specific items. So for example, someone might need a power wheelchair for long distance walking, but they can walk just fine in their home. And if they can walk just fine in their home, Medicare isn't going to cover a power wheelchair. So we ended up trying to expand our equipment pool to offer as many different things as possible. The equipment pool, of course, is available to anyone in our service area. And, you know, many times I get calls from family members who are requesting specific pieces of equipment. And oftentimes I'll ask them, well, where did you get the idea for this piece of equipment? And maybe 80% of the time they say, my home health aide said, if I use this piece of equipment, it would make a difference in what I'm able to do. So what I'd like to do is share with you some pictures of different kinds of equipment that are available, because I want all of you to know what we have available, and that if you suspect that someone might need a piece of equipment, if there's a way that an occupational therapist or a physical therapist might be available to do an evaluation with the person to determine exactly what's appropriate, we might have that piece of equipment that might make that person's quality of life better. So we'll start here. We have mobility equipment including canes and front-wheeled walkers, four-wheeled walkers, manual wheelchairs, scooters. We also have power wheelchairs. In order for someone with ALS to use one of our power wheelchairs, we require that there is an occupational therapist or a physical therapist who actually does a wheelchair evaluation, because we need to know that the person is going to be safe in driving that chair. A lot of times people will use the power wheelchair from the equipment pool as kind of a stopgap until their insurance-paid chair arrives. We also have many electric lift chairs. We have different kinds of transfer equipment. So standing lifts and also power and manual patient lifts, either Hoyer or Invacare brands. We also have a multitude of bathroom equipment. So anything from a raised toilet seat to a toilet safety frame, grab bars, a shower chair. We also have tub transfer benches. And we have about 45 tub slide shower chairs. And I don't know if you're all aware of this piece of equipment, but it's a rolling shower commode chair that actually, this is the freestanding rolling shower commode chair that attaches to a frame. And then by pressing a lever right here on the side of the seat, the whole chair will slide across. So it eliminates the need for someone to stand to transfer. Sometimes it'll save people from having to do bathroom remodeling. This is the same, kind of the same idea. It's a shower helper. It's meant to be used in a narrower space and with a lower threshold. So again, it's a rolling shower commode chair that attaches to a frame, and then when you press a lever, the whole chair slides in. The difference with this chair is that the chair itself actually will rotate 360 degrees. We have hospital beds, and we have different kinds of mobile arm supports. So if an occupational therapist thinks that someone might be able to feed themselves using a different kind of mobile arm support, we try to keep those available for people. And we also have unusual items, so that if someone really wants to keep fishing, we have 7 different adaptive fishing reels that someone is able to catch fish even though they have limited arm strength. And periodically we'll get pictures in the office of someone who has a string of fish and that they've caught on this kind of adaptive reel. And then we also have unusual things. So in this case, this person was a pianist, and due to arm weakness was trying to use this pillow to support his arm so he could play the piano, but couldn't reach all of the keys, and so we set him up with a suspension sling, and then he was able to reach the whole keyboard. Again, the focus is on what is it that the person wants to continue to do. And so just a summary of the Durable Medical Equipment Loan Pool. It's free of charge. The person just needs to be registered with us as a person with ALS. It's helpful if we have recommendations from someone in the healthcare community in recommending the equipment. And also that the whole purpose of it is that we want people to focus on living with ALS. Now at this time, I have the honor to introduce my coworker, Cheryl Myers. She is an occupational therapist and one of our patient services coordinators.
Good morning. We're going to switch the mic here. I'd like to share some information about our Herbig Sing Communication and Adaptive Device Program. And it's one that was initially instrumental in terms of Kent Herbig, who's the first baseman for the Twins years ago. His father had ALS. And then Larry Singh, who was one of our board members who had ALS as well. And they saw a need to develop a program to help people in terms of their speech and using electronic communication devices. So the purpose was, just as it stated, to help people who are losing their speech because of either the bulbar form onset of ALS or because of continued progressive muscle weakness in terms of the respiratory muscles used for volume or for the muscles used to control the tongue and the lips. So we'll just talk with you a little bit about what services are there. One of them is voice banking. And voice banking is a wonderful opportunity for people to record their own voice. And that voice then can be used on speech-generated communication devices. So I don't know how many of you may have heard somebody using a device where it's sort of an electronic voice, and people have to decide, do they want a male voice or a female voice, high, low, all those things. This would allow the person to actually use their own voice. And so they would record it early while they still have good voice volume and good control. And then if they need a speech-generated device later, they can then input that into that device. So our program trains people on how to do that. It's pretty easy to use. We offer them an external microphone to be able to use that. They just plug it into their computer. And they then can record words, phrases, or sentences. And actually, probably the most difficult thing for them to do is figure out what do they want to be able to say in the future. But we do have some handouts that give them some guidelines. Some people can do it quite quickly. Others take more time to do it. But it's a wonderful opportunity. Just needs to be done while the person still has good voice volume and good speech articulation. Just wanted to show you an example of a more low-tech device that can really be helpful for folks. This is a chatterbox, and it's a form of a voice amplifier. So if the volume of the person becomes less, but they can still articulate their words pretty clearly, you can use this kind of amplification to allow them to communicate with others. And there are a variety of microphones that can be set up for that, depending upon what the person's able to do. So it's a low-tech device. It can be strapped around the waist or just placed on a person's lap or wherever and used. These are examples of some very simple devices that are speech-generating devices, but also the person needs to be able to type. So they have a keyboard on them, and they're lightweight. They're easy to move. They're very small, probably about 10 inches wide and maybe 8 or 9 in depth, and allows for conversation between two people. It can be typed on there. You can see there's typing there and here, and then they can also hit a key that allows for the speech generator device. And there's word prediction with these as well, so very nice devices. This is just another example of one, but it's a little higher end in that it also combines a computer. So the person can use a computer along with their speech generating device. And of course we have to figure out how do we mount these for the person for them to be able to use it. And this is just an example of a mounting system. It's connected to her wheelchair, and then there's a rigid pipe that goes up, and then it can be adapted in terms of the angle, whatever is useful for the individual. And there's various forms of mounting systems. This is just an example of another way to access a computer. This person is using a head mouse. There's a receptor here, and maybe you've seen those. Person wears a little dot. So another way, a person can still use a computer for email, internet access, and what have you, without having use of their hands. This is an easy software that you can purchase and put on a computer. It's a virtual on-screen keyboard. And what this one demonstrates is a word prediction. So the person types a T, and all these words could come up. And then rather than having to type the entire word, they can just scan down and hit the word that they want. And that can be adapted for the individual. The keyboard can be made larger. The keys can change. You don't have to be in the same position. And it's very, very adaptable. This is just an example of aids that can be used to control TVs, DVDs, electrical appliances that do not require the person to have hand control. This is an Ameriphone. Again, it allows a person to use a phone, answer a phone, make phone calls without using their hands. It can all be done verbally. And then I just wanted to show you how you can integrate a power wheelchair with these various tools. This person is using a red pillow switch to control her wheelchair. And then there's a switch up here on the left that controls her phone system, and a switch over here that controls her TV. So she can be in her power wheelchair. She has no use of her hands, but she has a lot of independence. So to sum up, again, these are just examples of how people can be empowered through the technology that's available. It can be low-tech or high-tech, but very helpful in terms of improving the quality of somebody's life. And actually with the communication devices, maintaining relationships with others, either in their family or with friends, or even when they're out and about and need to talk with somebody. So thank you for that. And now I'd like to introduce Jennifer Myrie, our social worker, who will share more information about other services at the program.
I'll be covering today our additional chapter programs and services. There are more. Everything ranging, that's not what I meant to do. From our Jack Norton Family Respite Care program to information and advocacy that our chapter provides. So first we'll talk about our Jack Norton Family Respite Care program. This is a program that is our one program really that is geared specifically to serve the family caregiver of the person with ALS. versus the person with ALS. The idea is to provide a much-needed break or respite from the caregiving tasks normally provided by that family caregiver. Caregiving tasks can include both personal or hands-on care or non-personal cares. Some examples of personal cares, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, would be assisting a person with ALS with a bath, helping with grooming, or helping someone get dressed or undressed. Non-personal cares might include things like meal preparation or light housekeeping, or even simply visiting with the person with ALS. The definition of respite for a family caregiver is different with everyone. For some family caregivers, it's a respite to get out and be able to run errands. For some, it's getting together with friends for a meal, perhaps going out shopping or going to get coffee or out for a walk. For some people, even simply staying home and taking a nap is a respite, and that's a perfectly acceptable way for a family caregiver to use our respite program. They don't need to leave the house. One way we do discourage family members from using the respite care program is to use it while they're working. And that's because it can become very tempting to use the program as a way to maybe fill gaps in care versus taking that time to get a much needed break. This program designates a certain number of hours each month for respite for the family caregiver. Currently, that amount is 18 hours per month. Next program I'd like to talk about is our volunteer program. Our chapter works with a number of volunteers within our service area. Unlike the respite care program, this program provides strictly non-hands-on care, non-personal cares, and you can see some examples up here. Things like cleaning or scrapbooking, yard work even, light home maintenance, help with pet care, those kinds of things. If you find yourselves working with someone who might be able to benefit from our volunteer program, I would encourage you to let them know about it and have them give our chapter a call. They can utilize both the volunteer program and the respite care program at the same time. Oops. This is a picture of one of our support groups. I'll be talking about those next. Our chapter has a number of support groups within our service area, and we do continually take a look at where the needs are in our service area for support groups, and as needed, develop new groups. Support groups, as you can imagine, offer anyone affected by ALS a place to go to receive information about the disease, ideas about how to manage symptoms, as well as ways to cope with the disease. Support groups also give people a place to share their stories as well as their feelings. In addition to support groups, our chapter also hosts an annual Day to Remember ceremony or program. This program gives those who have lost someone to ALS an opportunity to come together and remember and honor their loved one. Something else our chapter provides on an ongoing basis is consultation and support. We do this on a daily basis, actually, with people who have ALS, perhaps their friends or family members, or even healthcare professionals. When I talk with a person who has ALS or is dealing with ALS for the first time, I let them know that our chapter is available and will remain available to assist them throughout the progression of their disease with any of their questions or concerns. As a result, we receive calls and emails every day with questions about symptoms, available resources, or just to simply listen. Our chapter staff provides information, but we also make referrals as needed as well. Here's a picture of our lending library. Our library has information on about ALS, the disease, death and dying, talking to children about death and dying, grief and loss, as well as inspirational stories and books that are authored by persons with ALS. Anyone who might be interested in any of these materials can contact our chapter to request them, and we'll send them out free of charge. An important piece to the health care of many persons with ALS includes attendance at an ALSA or ALS Association center or ALS clinic. So we've got the centers identified here and clinics down here. An ALSA center is certified by the ALS Association's national office as a clinic that meets certain important standards of care, including, but not limited to, having certain members of a multidisciplinary team available, including a nurse, physical or occupational therapist, speech-language pathologist, social worker, and to have those professionals available at each visit. There are 2 ALSA centers in our service area. One is at Hennepin Faculty Associates in Minneapolis, the other Mayo Clinic in Rochester. In addition to these 2 ALSA centers, there are also 2 ALS-specific clinics within our service area. And they are Merit Care in Fargo and the U of M Fairview in Minneapolis. While these clinics are not affiliated with our chapter, we maintain a positive working relationship with them and provide services to the patients who are seen there. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about information and advocacy. In partnership with our national office, our chapter stays on the forefront of the latest news related to ALS. Recent developments in chapter-supported ALS research, for example, are regularly distributed via our quarterly newsletter, blast emails that are sent out regularly, as well as at our support group meetings. And in terms of advocacy, once again, our chapter teams with our national office to participate in our annual Advocacy Day in Washington, D.C. in May. Chapter representatives, along with persons with ALS and their families, gather in Washington, D.C. to meet with legislators regarding issues important to people with ALS. The ALS Association's advocacy efforts have resulted in legislative changes that have had a profound impact on the people we serve. So it's been an important mission for us. So that concludes my portion. At this time, I will turn it over to Ann Suplee. She is our chapter's chaplain and another patient services coordinator.
Thank you.
Okay here?
Can you hear me now? Thank you. Hello. That way. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time today talking about how folks cope with ALS, and in particular the emotional impact on people who are diagnosed with ALS, on their families and friends, other loved ones, as well as on healthcare professionals, because we're all affected as we work with this disease. The emotional impact for persons with ALS obviously is different for every person. We all navigate our lives in different ways, and we tend to think that, or tend to encourage people to think about, you know, if the person has a certain personality type before they're diagnosed with ALS, that will continue. If it's someone who stuffs all their feelings, they're not going to change that just because they've been diagnosed with ALS. It's obviously varies a lot based on when the person is diagnosed. A 34-year-old with young children is going to have a different emotional reaction to being diagnosed with this disease than, say, an 88-year-old. It is different for every person. People with ALS are faced with losing abilities as their bodies change. Lisa and Linda both talked about the progression of the disease as people's bodies change and they lose abilities. There are times they need to grieve those losses, that those are significant changes in our lives. Increased dependency on other people, having to have a healthcare provider come in and assist with bathing or dressing can be, can be very, very tough for folks. Having your child help you go to the bathroom is really hard. Another role change that I don't think we talk about a lot is that we live in a culture that very much defines us based on what we do for work, what company we work for, how we live our days. And when those are taken away, that can be tremendously hard for people to transition to being at home all the time or to not having that identity as a worker. Also, preparing for death. Most of us are going to die. Okay, thank you. You're supposed to laugh at that. It's the one thing we're all going to do, right? And it's the one thing we don't talk about very much. And in addition to preparing for death and for not being here, there's a lot of what we call anticipatory loss. Thinking about things like, I'm not going to be able to see my grandchildren. I won't be here to celebrate my 50th wedding anniversary. Whatever that may be, that is also, it's the loss of what would have been. Common feelings and reactions to all of these losses. Of course, denial, very common. Most of us have experienced that at one point in our lives or another. It's a very normal way to cope. Sadness is another that, of course, there are going to be times of sadness. Again, not a concern unless it starts leading into depression. The denial, a fine coping mechanism unless it starts getting in the way of someone's ability to live their lives. Anger is another that comes out in a lot of different ways. Certainly people can be angry at the disease, sometimes angry at the doctor who diagnosed them, and sometimes